Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today we're doing something that did not go well for me at all last year. We're doing our bowl predictions episode here just a few weeks before the season begins. Now, last year I forget exactly what I had, but I did a reaction video to it, in the spring as to what my bowl predictions were, and they were not good. It was the classic. I was high on Florida. Didn't work out very well. Did not work out very well at all. But just some other things. I thought that John Mateer would be a Heisman finalist. Now, granted, that wasn't that far off before he got hurt, but they did not go very well last year. So, by the law of averages, that means that I'm going to do incredible this year. That's what I'm going with. That's what I'm telling myself as I was making these notes for this video. So, I got five. I have five bold predictions that I'm going to go through today. But before we do that, I'm doing this football content every single day all summer long, and I'm just going to keep pumping it out during the season. So if you have been enjoying it, whether you've been watching me for a little bit or you're new around here, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, follow me on all the socials. I appreciate it so much. It helps me out a ton. But let's just get into it. Let's just start talking about some college football and some things that might make me look really dumb, but they could make me look pretty smart in the line. So this first one has got to do with the Kentucky Wildcats. If you've been following my stuff, you know that I'm pretty excited about Kentucky. My take for Kentucky this year is that they make a bowl game, which isn't that bold on the surface, but I think they also beat Alabama in week 2. Let me start off with the Bama week 2, because that's obviously the more, not egregious because I think it makes sense, but that is the bolder take. We have seen Kalen DeBoer's Alabama teams, and to a certain extent his teams at Washington, really catch their stride at the end of the season. Now, what that means for the beginning of the season is that they're not their best self. Right, they're a weaker version of themselves earlier on in the season. They need time to develop. We saw this happen last year. They lost to Florida State in the week week 1 opener, and then they came. They beat Georgia. They won 10 games. They made the playoff. They made it to Atlanta. It's happened. It happened last year with this DeBoer team, and why it could happen even again this year. They're bringing in a new quarterback, whether it is Keelan Russell or Austin Mack. The running game still has some questions, although I do believe that guys like A.K. Deere, E.J. Crowell, they're going to be able to answer those. Can they do it in week 2, though? Right, and that receiver room, you have a lot of continuity. The defense, I think, is very good, but offensively, with a new quarterback and still some question marks, not concerns, but question marks at running back, you could maybe see just in week 2, they're still working out the kinks. Now, the first thing that you're going to say back to me is, well, so is Kentucky. Right, so is Kentucky. They're bringing in Kenny Minchie. It's his first time starting as a quarterback. That is true. Right at running back, C.J. Baxter might be the number one guy. He's been banged up. How good is he? It's a fair question. Kentucky's defense is definitely not as good as Alabama's defense. That's fine. All that is true. But if that's all it took to predict winners, we wouldn't play the football games. Right? Bama was way better than FSU last year. Didn't matter. I think in the context of this game, right, this is week 2. It is Will Stein's first home conference game in Lexington, and he has been talking. He has been incredibly confident, right? There is that undeniable buzz around Lexington. He brought it at SEC Media Days. In terms of Kenny Minchie at quarterback being, his first time starting, it's a valid concern, especially against a defense and like Alabama's secondary that I think is as good as it is. It can be sketchy, but he was step for step with C.J. Carr last year for that job at Notre Dame, and now C.J. Carr is a Heisman favorite, right? So I think the world of Kenny Minchie. I think that Will Stein is an offensive genius, obviously. You're going to have a spot here in week 2 where no one really knows what to expect from Will Stein's Kentucky team. No one knows. Because they're not going to show all the cards in week 1. I forget if they play week 1, but it's not. It's a non-power team, obviously. They're going to be able to jump Alabama, with their offense. Bama's not really going to know what to expect. And you're going to have a really good environment. It's a 3:30 Eastern kickoff on ABC. I think it's just going to be one of those spots where this is kind of Kentucky's Super Bowl. And for Alabama, obviously they're not going to take it lightly. They're not going to sleepwalk in there. But this game means way more to Kentucky than it means to Alabama. And when you're in those spots, my upset alert radar immediately peaks up. And for this one, I think Kentucky's able to beat Alabama. And just in terms of making a bowl game, look, Kentucky's schedule is not easy. It's very tough. They play some of the best teams in the league. But just 6 wins, I think, is very reachable. Because you go through your schedule, right? You have 2 games against Youngstown State and South Alabama. Fine. I think they beat the Crimson Tide. That's 3. Can you find me 3 more wins in the rest of your SEC slate in the game against Louisville? I think you can, right? Home game against Vandy should be good. Road tool against Carolina. What are they looking like? Road game against Tennessee late in the year. Have they panned out or are they struggling a little bit? I think Kentucky can make a bowl game and they beat Alabama in week 2. But my second bold take here is that Alabama drops that game and they still make the playoff. And a lot of it, like I just said, right? This happened last year with the Florida State game, where they lost that game, then they went 10-1 the rest of the way, and they made the playoff. and then they won a playoff game. I think that happens again this year, right? Because for the Crimson Tide, I'm really excited about a lot of pieces on this offense, right? Keelan Russell at quarterback, like I said, who I think will get the starting job. EJ Crowell at running back, Darian Morgan at receiver, true freshman or redshirt freshman, who I'm really excited about. And I think as the year goes on, all three of those guys on offense are going to grow into their own and absolutely explode and be incredibly dynamic. Defensively, I have listed those questions in terms of, growth and getting familiar with each other. Right, that front seven, elite transfers brought in. The secondary might be one of the best in the country. So I had them losing in week 2 because this is kind of sort of the history that we've seen with the Boars teams where maybe it's a bit of a slow start. But then this Alabama team, I think, is going to really pick it up. And they're going to really pick it up because after this Kentucky game, they host FSU, revenge spot against a weaker team. They host South Carolina, not a good SEC team, really, or they have high ceiling, but their floor is pretty low. They go to Mississippi State, another lower tier SEC team, before they get that Georgia game. So you look after this Kentucky loss in theory, that's 3 pretty light games to deal with the loss, figure out your weaknesses, and get tuned up before you host Georgia. I think this Bama team, the schedule lines up, it's hard again, but right where I think they can get punched in the face and they can get back up and really develop into an elite team that can make the playoff and maybe go win some games. So even though I have Bama losing to Kentucky in week 2, I believe they go 10-2 this year and they make the playoff again. My third bold take, this is the one that's going to get me flack. This is the one that I'm going to get a lot of pushback on, and it's fair. It's incredibly fair because I'm predicting something that just seems almost impossible and hasn't happened yet. But I'm taking it in stride. I think that Georgia misses the SEC championship and they miss the playoff. Now, this is the dumbest one I have, right? This is, I think, the dumbest a bold prediction I have in terms of how dumb I could look by week 4, right? Because even though Georgia doesn't play anybody super tough, the hardest game through week 4 is in week 4 when they host Oklahoma, they could just be popping people like that. And all of a sudden you're looking back at what I said here and just like, dude, what are you talking about? My questions for Georgia are really just all on offense. Right, the defense is going to be what it is. It's going to be a Kirby Smart defense filled with talent. The pass rush maybe still some questions, but it shouldn't be a glaring weakness. Offensively, I think they're going to be good, but I don't think they're going to be explosive. I look at the receiver room that was already not super great down the field last year with a guy like Zachariah Branch, and I feel like they've only lost that this year. Right, they bring in Isaiah Canyon from Georgia Tech. They have some really good-looking true freshmen, but how true freshmen are true freshmen. It's really hard to project how good they can be. So I don't know if I can rely on that necessarily for Georgia in this passing game. Now, Gunnar Stockton, he is going to make every right decision. He is going to be able to hit tight windows close to the line of scrimmage, and the running game with Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bones should be pretty strong. But if that's all they can do, I don't know how much I trust Georgia to go be able to, come back if they get jumped and they're down by 10 in the second quarter. Right? I don't know if they can execute a 2 or 4 minute drill late in the game to go get a crucial field goal or a crucial touchdown because I just don't know how quickly they can move the ball in chunk plays. So even though their offense could be efficient, I think that if you don't have that quick strike ability, that dynamic downfield threat, that can get you beat in games at Ole Miss or at Alabama or in that Oklahoma game. And that game against Florida, that's also not a given. Florida was miserable last year. They almost took them down. That controversial catch, or not catch by Michael Sturdivant, if that is ruled the other way, Florida might win that game. They probably do. So this Georgia team, they were kind of walking on eggshells last year, and I don't know if I can confidently say that they're any better this year than they were last year. Now, they're still going to be very good. I still have them winning 9 games. I'm not predicting a Kirby Smart fall off. You'll look at Georgia, and they'll still be Georgia. But among Oklahoma, at Alabama, Florida, at Ole Miss, they have to go to Carolina, the game against Georgia Tech. It's a bunch of tricky landmine spots. And against teams that they don't want to have the overall roster talent, but teams that have that explosive firepower to just quick strike you from 60 yards downfield, games can kind of get out of hand, and Georgia will be looking, they're like, okay, we've got to be really methodical, and we have to nail everything for the next 30 minutes of game time to come back in this game. I think that Georgia this year, this will be very good. I think you go 9-3. I think it's 3 conference losses. I don't think they make it to Atlanta. And by virtue of that, I have Georgia missing the playoff. I already know the comments I'm getting, and it's fair. That's why these are bold predictions, because they probably won't happen. Moving on to my fourth one here. This one's a little more fun. I think that the SEC has the winners of the Heisman, the Doak Walker Award, and the Blitnikoff Award. Now, obviously, the Heisman is the best player in the country, Doak is the best running back in the country, and the Blitnikoff is the best receiver in the country. Looking at the odds for the Heisman Trophy, Arch Manning is right behind TJ Carr. He's number 2 in the odds at plus 750. Then you have Trinidad Chambliss there, plus 1,300, the quarterback for Ole Miss. Gunnar Stockton and Sam Levitt. Gunner's at 1,900, Sam Levitt's at 2,000. John Mateer back there at 2,500. Marcel Reed. Keelan Russell also in the top 12 in the Heisman odds. That tells you a lot, but the Heisman's probably going to a quarterback again this year. No real surprise there. And the SEC, I think, is the deepest quarterback conference in the country. Now, they might not have the best quarterback in the country, maybe not even the best two, but I think they have the deepest just amount of, quarterbacks who can pop. So with that depth, I trust the SEC to maybe get 2 quarterbacks there, and I think they can win it once they get there. In terms of the Doak Award, I mean, if I think the SEC is the best conference when it comes to quarterback depth, the running back depth in the SEC is stupid. Ahmad Hardy at Missouri, assuming he comes back for 8 or 9 games. Kejuan Lacey at Ole Miss. Jaden Ball at Florida. Nate Frazier at Georgia. I could go on forever. The amount of elite RB1s in this conference is absurd. So obviously, you have guys like Caleb Hawkins at Oklahoma State. He could easily be there. LJ Martin at BYU. But those guys would be in the race. I just think, once again, the depth at running back in the SEC and the superstar depth, not just quality backs, but guys who would be RB1 anywhere in the country, the SEC, I think, really wins that race against every other conference. So I think probably one of those top 3, whether it's Hardy, Lacey, or Ball, I think one of them could take on the Doak Award, and the Blitnikoff. Cam Coleman at Texas. I think Ryan Williams at Bama will have a bounce-back year. I look at the guys on LSU's team, like Winston Watkins is really excelling during camp. Can he just dominate that receiver room and have an incredible year? A guy, at Missouri, guys like Donovan Olugbayde, Caleb Goody transferring in, sleeper name. Watch out for him in Oklahoma. Parker Livingstone, Trell Harris. And at South Carolina, man, Nick Harbor, don't sleep on what he can do. This has been his first offseason fully focusing on football. That means he's refining his route running, his true catching, really being a great athlete at receiver as opposed to a great athlete who's just playing receiver. Right, so just once again, the depth of the superstar potential at that spot in the SEC blows my mind. So because of that, I think the SEC can win both the Heisman, all 3 of the Heisman, the Doak, and the Blitnikoff this year. And then my final one, my 5th one here, I think that the SEC is going to get less, maybe several less teams in the playoff than they did last year, but win it. Now in 2024, right, we've only had 2 12-team playoffs. 2024, they had 3 teams in, and they had 5 last season. I don't think the SEC gets 5 teams in the playoff again this year. They certainly have 5 or more playoff caliber teams, but they've got to play through their schedule and just, by logic, it happened last year, but last year was kind of an anomaly in terms of how successful the top of the SEC was and also how much they didn't have to necessarily play each other multiple times. Where you had 5 SEC teams going 10-2 or better. I don't know if you can get that again this year. I think that the number for the league is going to be probably at that 3 mark. But I look at Texas, who is my national champion this year. That's who I have winning it all preseason. But I think they'll make it in. I think Bama makes it in, and with that offense, if as it develops through the season, that defense being steady, I think they can go on a run. A team like Ole Miss, can they just get hot? Can they break through? LSU, does everything click? Because if LSU makes the playoff, it's going to be hard for me at that point to really easily pick against them, because if LSU is in the playoff, that means that everything worked, and if everything worked, that is the best roster in the country with one of the best coaches in the country at that point, if they're in the playoff, right, in Lane Kiffin. So I think that the SEC, we've talked for the past few years about how, the top 2 or 3 teams isn't quite there with the Big Ten, but the depth is there. I think you look at this year, the depth is still superior, but those top 2 or 3 teams, I think they hit another gear this year. So you only have 3-ish teams from the league who make the playoff, but I think those 3 are really all going to be truly primed to make a run, right? Because last year, Bama and Oklahoma, they weren't making a run. They weren't winning that last year. I think you won't be able to say that same thing for the 3 SEC teams in the playoff this year. So I think that even though they might have less representatives, the SEC will get back on top and win a championship this year. So if you made it through the end of this video, first off, thank you. Thank you for watching. And I'm sure that you yelled at me for a couple of times. So comment, what's wrong with my predictions. Give me your bold takes. I want to hear all of it. I truly believe there's no such thing as a bad prediction in the preseason because anything can happen. Anything can happen, right? Just look back to last year, how no one could have predicted what happened last year, or just a few things of that. keep going years and years back, that is always there. So drop your bold takes down below. I want to hear all of them. Let's all be nice to each other, but especially me. But thank you so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. Once again, I am Will Thomas. If you want a steady dose of college football content all season long, subscribe to me here. Follow me on Twitter at Will Thomas CFB and TikTok at Tailgate Talk SEC. Thank you so much for watching this episode.